Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for having me. É ótimo estar aqui em Portugal. And today we are going to talk about why our digital future will be just fine, despite all of the controversy surrounding surveillance, misinformation, toxicity, addiction. Now that we have a generation of digital natives behind us, we have real research, and it's no longer all bad. We're finally seeing that our digital spaces can be more inclusive than in real life. And unlike in real life, everyone has a seat at the table. Now, media is power, so we're right to be concerned about it. A Dutch sociologist said that new media is taken everywhere, from seashore to mountaintop, and everywhere it isolates the bearer from his surroundings, from each other, from reality, and from ourselves. Except, he was talking about the portable radio in 1963. Now, as a cultural specialist who focuses on technology and society, I became really interested in this historical perspective on media and how we have culturally adapted around it. So today I'm going to talk about that historical perspective and about modern media, and then we'll tackle some of the myths around internet and society with some of the latest data. And then we'll go on to look at the societal trade-offs and what we can do for a better digital future. So right now, we are in the middle of a radical digital transformation. Except that we've been through a few radical transformations. So with the advent of the printing press, Socrates was worried that writing things down would implement forgetfulness in man's souls. And we were afraid that the radio would cause our kids to lose sleep at night listening to the radio. And then when we put radio in cars, we were worried that it would distract us and cause accidents. But look what happened. We're safer than ever. We developed guardrails around it. Literally, seatbelts and airbags and autonomous driving. And what we once worried about became safer. And get this, we worried about the watch at one point. We were afraid that by wearing the time on our wrist, we would become addicted to looking at the time. So here's an article about Thomas Edison. You would think that they were talking about Elon Musk here. This was in the 1800s. Edison was inventing lots of things, and people wanted to cancel him. They wanted to ban him. And that day they wanted to hang him with a hemp rope. You know, he was of questionable character. He was addicted to electricity, and electricity could electrocute us. We were worried that he would develop machines that would destroy all confidence, and we were worried kind of about the same things that we are today with social media. Its divisive impact on society, loss of privacy, amplification of bad news, and mission creep. You know, what if one day the aerophone and the phonograph, what next? So I actually would posit that we are returning to our oral and pictorial traditions. You know, cavemen used memes and communicated through pictures. We entertained each other reciting poetry and singing songs, where we got that instant interaction with likes and feedback. And the printing press kind of took all that away. It became one way. There was a gatekeeper to all that information. And as we've cycled through these different medias, the smartphone is really bringing us back to those oral and pictorial traditions. We're making little videos to show each other. We're getting that instant feedback that we got when our traditions were oral. But it's bringing the same kind of problems. And that's that our oral traditions vary according to our tribe. And there is really no single agreed upon truth anymore. So before the printing press, it was the kings and the popes that determined what was true. Most people, the only content that they consumed was that was given to them by their priest. So the church was the original content algorithm. It distributed the news, censored the news. And while everything has changed, really nothing has changed. Instead of being under the eyes of our neighbors or the church, we're under the eyes of our Facebook friends or of advertisers. So we worry about advertisers tracking us. But forever advertisers have manipulated our emotions, even before subliminal advertising. Ancient merchants were the original influencers, the traveling salesmen, the snake oil salesman. They were the original kind of YouTubers with their one-on-one product displays and conveying information in a very personalized manner, speaking all the languages of the world. So advertising influence was always at the center of power. It's just changed from trade routes to clicks and likes. So just like social media eliminated our traditional gatekeepers, but made it easier for extremists to find a voice, Martin Luther, back in the day, bypassed the ultimate gatekeeper, the Pope. And Martin Luther was an extremist. He spread misinformation. And his access to the printing press allowed him to push emotional buttons and spread disinformation, just like social media does today. And what happened to him? He was canceled. He was excommunicated. It's the ultimate cancel. So the printing press brought on all of this social disruption, all of these shady characters, just like social media has. But eventually, we developed new institutions, new laws, new culture around this to mitigate the disruption. Eventually, that will happen now. It's just taking time. So we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. Humans evolve slowly. Tech is changing faster. But our minds, our institutions, our laws, even our language can't keep up. So we want Facebook to police all of the lies, all the disinformation that's out there. But what government or institution has ever been able to do that? So let's take a look at some of the modern dynamics. So television showed us the world, but it didn't connect us as people. Again, it was that one way. There was no input. It was still an information gatekeeper. Digital culture is really different because it eliminates that friction. It democratizes speech. But at the same time, it amplifies new voices, like Martin Luther and some other really dangerous ones. So this is a recent article that was in The Atlantic that really resonated with people. Jonathan Haidt compared what's been going on in the last 10 years with social media to the Tower of Babel, that when humans acquired language, we built a tower to heaven, and then God came in, knocked down the tower, gave everybody different languages so they couldn't communicate. And he likes social media to that our communities are broken and fragmented, and we're not speaking the same language. And that the last 10 years have just been uniquely stupid. But have they been? I mean, the last 10 years? Long before that, we had no civil rights. We tolerated smoking and drunk driving. Entire classes of people were stigmatized and ostracized. We had horrible wars. I actually think that our digital communities are going to be just fine. We're creating new communities. These platforms are bringing us together in the sense that it's this new scaffolding of our broken society. You can find whatever kind of digital content you want online. If you want to share your family pictures, you can go to Facebook, you can share what you want to share. If you want to have an all-out debate and get destroyed, you can put your opinions on Twitter. If you want to keep it formal and have everyone praise you and congratulate you and say, I'm thrilled to be here, I'm so honored, you can keep it to LinkedIn. No thanks, I will take it to Twitter. But everyone can pick their culture and you can opt out. So digital communities are actually, in many cases, changing our world for the better. Ukraine brought together a digital community of support, some of it very specifically organized. They pressured companies to exit Russia. They raised contributions. They shared the Ukrainian values with the world. This was digital diplomacy that was actually better than what we have in real life, and at global geopolitical scale. Our new digital culture actually also allows us to form the narrowest and most unique communities. So my cat was diagnosed with kidney disease. Online, I found a community of people and support and information from all over the world. So we really can make meaningful connections online. So as we sit here, grappling with the harms of social media, I'd encourage you to step back and think about the differences social media can make. For the politically oppressed in the Ukraine, people who are geographically isolated without role models or a career path, people who are socially marginalized in places where no one in their community identifies like they do, and people that are physically challenged and really can't participate in real life. You know, a generation ago, we were all told, eat your food, think about the kids in Africa. Well, I would say when it comes to social media, think about the kids in Africa. You know, there are apps that work on an Android device with no internet connection that help people in Africa diagnose crop disease for their livelihood. Artificial intelligence is bringing 2,000 languages across Africa together, so there's mutual understanding. This is not society breaking down and becoming fragmented. Africa was a pioneer in fintech because people did not have access to banking, and so it brought them financial inclusion. So when you start to think about all the harms of social media in our lives, I'd encourage you to take a step back and think about how you may be operating from a position of internet privilege, because for most of the rest of the world, it's a lifeline. So a lot of what we fear about the internet may be just myths. We have a lot of new data coming out. For the first time ever, we have professors and institutions studying the impact of social media. But we're still blaming it for everything. President Obama said that it creates these thought bubbles, and it's really disastrous to society. But if we didn't have these thought bubbles around social media, what would we have? Cable news? One-size-fits-all advertising? The immediate people around us who are in our work and home bubbles? You know, biologists will tell us that we naturally kind of seek out people who look like us and our parents. You know, social media nudges us away from that harmful practice. And at the same time, it gives us tools to verify what was really going on inside of our bubble. So we know the harms of Instagram, especially for young girls. But maybe we can move on from worrying about that. I mean, most young girls are at this point starting to move to TikTok. Now, what is so different about TikTok? You know, we play videos on both of these, so what's the difference? I mean, some people will say it's this magic algorithm, but you know, Pinterest has a great algorithm. It's not like we can't do algorithms in this country. But the difference is that Instagram is on the social graph. It's who you follow, who are your friends, who are their friends. TikTok is not on the social graph. It's on the interest graph. It takes you out of that bubble of your friends and the people that you choose to follow and exposes you to new information. Lies, misinformation, fake news. This has always been a part of politics, forever in history. But before this, it spread unchecked. This is Tobias Deinlein. He's a professor in Vienna on media psychology and communication. He worked in a group with 19 other professors to study the effect of digitization on our democracies. What did they find? Nothing. But yes, social media has changed how we consume political information, how we interact with our politicians, but other factors like social and economic change are more important. There's a lot of fake news, a lot of misinformation on social media. But research suggests that it's shared by few and actually having small effects. Now that we have lots of data behind us, professors are churning through all this data, millions of tweets and posts, and finding that 1% of users share 80% of the information. A lot of information is still shared by email chain letters. And at the same time, most people don't even get their news from social media. In the highly contested 2016 American election, 14% of people got their news from social media. And we see how everybody is now getting their news content through social platforms, but people who get their news often from a social media platform are 19% in 2021, and it's going down. So Brendan Nyhan is a professor at Dartmouth studying social media. He shows that social media really does break us out of the social bubble more than in real life. And that's precisely why it's so uncomfortable. Just like diversity, this is changing society, and it's changing it for the better with diversity of thought. He looked at these rabbit hole events where people on YouTube spiral down into misinformation and violence and found that it was really very small. 0.012% of video visits among only 2.79% of users. I mean, this is research from a month ago. So we're starting to find another story, that social media is out there creating harms, but it's also reflecting what we're like as a society. But a lot of this change was going on a long time before social media. Like the fact that we were losing our religion and our institutions in our neighborhoods, that predated social media. That we're becoming more individualistic. And even more so, where do we really consume our news? From news media. That is very different now than it was a generation ago, when it was a common truth. And now it's very polarized. And also the economic situation of rising inequality, job instability, that is creating a lot of anxiety and hatred. So apart from social media, we know that there's a lot of harms in artificial intelligence. You know, we are biased, and that's showing up in our AI systems. All of what is implicit in our life, our existing and our subconscious biases are showing up in artificial intelligence. But, you know, we haven't been able to fix bias in real life. AI might just give us the tools to do that as it maps out our biases, makes them discrete, and at the same time, as we get more data to train our data sets, we aren't using the few limited Western sources that we had, which showed us that, well, a bride looks like this, and then could not recognize a bride from the global South, or that coded all doctors as male. Our society is becoming more diverse, but even more so than that, we're getting more and more training data, which will tease out these inconsistencies. So we also worry that texting and digital communication is killing language, right? But we're really just changing the rules. The old rules about grammar were that it was kind of elitist. You know, we used grammar to kind of demonstrate superiority and correct each other. The new rules are to optimize efficiency and meaning. So look at that punctuation around saying hey, or hey, or hey. It means three very different things. So our grammar might be changing. We're dropping periods because we're hitting send. We don't need the period anymore. But the period's taking on a lot more meaning. I mean, look at how much lifting that period after hey is doing. It's creating a sense of formality. So we're not really kind of losing grammar, we're changing it. And we're really evolving it to real needs and real meaning. And of course, we're writing more than ever. That's what we're doing on our phones, reading what people are writing. So there's been this explosion of authorship that also means that everyone has a voice, for better or for worse. So there's a lot of concern about technology eroding our privacy. I think our privacy is just evolving. I mean, think about your mailbox that contains your bank information, your report card, your medical information that could be intercepted by anybody, and your phone number, name, and address in the phone book, and your medical records, court records, any kind of records were kind of at the courthouse with your neighbors, working there, looking at them. You know, we have a lot more privacy than ever. It's just in a different way. This is my house. I clicked right, told Google, please take my house out of your search results, and 2 weeks later it was blurred out. We have a lot of control over what kind of our information is online. You can go onto social media with a different name, with a different birthday. You know, I have a digital twin that has this whole persona, and it's not me. And we choose what we put online. And we probably have more control over our digital information than we do in real life. This is a hospital in Portugal, much more modern than a hospital in the US. You go in, you scan your card, it prints you out a little receipt, tells you where you're going. Now, in the US, they'd be calling out your name. And we have strict privacy rules around HIPAA. But technology affords us this kind of additional privacy that we don't have without technology. So we're still figuring all this out. What are the damages to society? What are the benefits? What is true? What is a myth? And we know that at the end of the day, there are trade-offs. We need to evaluate them as such, not in a vacuum. You know, surveillance is creepy, but so were these milk cartons. And sometimes the negatives and the positives are exactly the same thing. I mean, technology democratizes access and information, but it proliferates misinformation. It promotes social organization and community, but then it divides us into tribes. It's a double-edged sword. If we look at social media the same way in a pandemic, you know, it raised awareness. It allowed us to share and collect data in real time, but it spread misinformation and panic. And social media use in the youth is probably our most vulnerable and scary area. You know, it's changing our kids. I'm a mom, I understand that, it's a tough one. But I think that like anything else, social media, like sugar, like how much kids sleep, like how much video games they play, needs to be regulated. And in some ways, we have more control over our kids. Because we can't really control how much drugs and alcohol they consume, but we can control their use of social media. And we're getting more and more tools to do so. And actually, that drug and alcohol use and teenage pregnancy and everything that comes along with it is going down. Even the American Academy of Pediatrics found that social media now has its place in positive adolescent development. So I can't pretend to synthesize all the information that's out there. You can pull up another study that disproves any of this. Anything I say, there's another study that will say the opposite. You would have to be a neurologist, biologist, economist to balance out all of these trade-offs. But perspective is the key. So what can we do? First of all, kids need limits. We're getting ways to instill more limits, but what we have is really inferior. I mean, I know that there are apps to protect kids. None of them work. They're all terrible. I take my daughter's iPhone at night. I open up her TikTok. I click down a whole different path. When the next morning she opens up her TikTok, she's wondering why she's seeing My Little Pony videos instead of whatever else she'd been looking at. You know, we have that kind of control. We don't have great tools to do it. We're all not aware of how to do it, but I think that is what is coming. I think eventually we will have third-party packages or filters that we can buy that will do these things, or at least understand how to do it, because we're still figuring it out. Here's one example that I saw the other day. Instead of asking a kid, you know, you want to get on Instagram? How old are you? Are you 13? This is like, hey, we need a parent here. Hey, parent, what's a VCR? Because only an old person can answer that, right? And then like I'm saying with TikTok, you can go onto YouTube and you can click right on a video and you can say, I'm not interested. So, you know, just like we control how much our kids sleep and how much sugar they consume, we need to get on their devices and look at those videos, look at their history, and you can change that. You can send them down a different path. So the future of technology is in our hands and we're getting more control of it. You know, a lot of my clients or designers and data scientists will say, like, I don't want to be making these societal decisions. This is all on me. Like, no one cares. They're just telling me, like, roll it out, build it. But we're getting more and more institutions that are helping us out with this, to not leave designers alone to navigate this. And we have liberatory technology that's creating a more compassionate, accountable, and just tech ecosystem. We have laws that are only now just starting to develop around our platforms. Here was a proposal to the Dutch Parliament where they asked for just 4 things that the government needs to step in and help out with. So we're only just starting to build these guardrails around our digital interfaces. There are novel ideas like this. How about a nutrition label on the digital content that we consume? And there's all kinds of new, safer, and healthier social media options that are arising. And besides options, I'm an American. We don't just have options, we like to buy things and have a way to buy that option. So here's something that is a bed that you can put your phone to bed when you put yourself to bed, so you're not so enticed to pick up your phone. And these kinds of things are really interesting. It's a small detail, but it's showing how we're starting to rethink our traditional living spaces and behavior around incorporating digital communication into our life in a healthier way. So tech is giving us unprecedented access across borders, across social classes, across ideology. And we have to take a longer-term perspective and realize that we're still figuring all this stuff out. Our spaces have evolved from like our community gathering places, which were originally like bathhouses and pubs, into these digital spaces that we're still trying to figure out. How do we make them inclusive and safe? They may even become so much safer that we build entire communities around them. Beyond Web3 even, there's this move towards digital nationalism. Why be tied to geographical borders when we can form our own communities, which aren't polarized online? So what's out there on the digital horizon? Web3 is all about freeing ourselves from tech platforms, making the internet inclusive, and recreating a world where trust is possible. We have privacy rights legislation all over the world. We know that more data will be good data and improve our systems. A few decades ago, we couldn't imagine quantum computing and big data. And now look what we can do. We can't even imagine 5 years out how much more data we'll be able to compute and how much more equitable that will make our AI training and data sets. And finally, a diversity in approach. We have a lot of diversity initiatives, and we don't have a lot of faith that they're really working, but they eventually will, because the next generation is more diverse. They will build this in. It will be natural. Boomers in the US are 75% white. Gen Z is 50%. They're majority minority almost. And so diversity, equity, inclusion will not be an initiative. It'll be something that's built into society with people with different ideas designing these systems. So there is no turning back. These technologies are here because they have a purpose. We decide to use them, and you know that as designers, you are creating good things. We have a lot of new solutions emerging. Kids are being taught in school how to search for reliable information, and they're digital natives creating their own solutions. There's Be Real, that's the anti-Instagram, where you just kind of take a picture of yourself when it prompts you once a day at a random time just how you are. And as designers, you hold a lot of power. What you do is valuable to society. The question is how to manage it like we manage other valuable risks. So when it comes to our digital future, I think that we will be just fine. We're going through some rough times. This is the Wild West of data and privacy and emerging regulations. But I do believe that there is a new and inclusive world on the other side. Thank you.